Well, welcome everyone. This is going to be a super fun show today. We have Robin Dreeke. We're going to have a conversation, Robin and I. We have this thing teed up. He is such an interesting guy with a background at the Naval Academy and then in the Marines and then onto the FBI with counterintelligence. And so we're going to talk specifically because I look at CEOs, leaders running businesses, and the requirement of needing trust. And how do we trust? How do we know when to trust? Because it's so critical to running your organization well. And so Robin has written a book, The Code of Trust, and we're going to dive right into that. So Robin, thanks for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good seeing everyone. Doing live shows is the way to go. There is no doubt. And thank you for Pablo for pushing us to do things like this, as well as Jerry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I say all the time, Pablo and Roanne from Be the Stage, who help us produce this show, I mean, they do amazing work. And so when you look at the greatest opportunity to create connections and value for your community, there is no better opportunity than this one. And so I'm grateful for Pablo and Roanne and Be the Stage who help us do this. So format of the show, if you haven't been here before, Rob and I are going to have a conversation for 30, 40 minutes. If you have questions, go ahead and hop in the chat, ask away. If you want to hop on when we go do Q&A, we'll let you come right on. You take yourself off mute. Also in the chat, let us know where you're coming in from, because it looks like we have some couple new faces and I'd love to know exactly where you guys are coming from. So Robin, let's get right into this. What is trust? Let's get right to the foundation. What is trust in your mind?
It's an evolving definition, believe it or not. I only say evolving because I had someone I've recently made friends with on my show. Her name is Abby Morano, and she defines trust as safety, which is kind of an evolution, a little bit a step further than the way I'm defining trust. And that is, trust to me is really much more than ethics and morals. I'm not discounting those things, obviously, but what trust is, it's predictability. Because when you want to be able to say you trust someone, you want to reasonably predict what they're going to do in every situation. And it has nothing to do with liking. Liking is something separate, but trust really is predictable behavior, because if I can predict what someone's going to do, I can trust that they're going to be able to follow through or not follow through on things. Because the whole point of it for me is to manage expectations of the relationship, because the foundation of everything is a good, healthy, strong relationship. And if I can manage what I can reasonably expect another person is going to do, they're not going to disappoint. And by some reason, if they do happen to fall short of an expectation, that means that maybe something went a little sideways in our lives, and I need to see what is going on, what challenge they're having that I didn't anticipate. Because again, it forces us outside ourselves and seeing the world through someone else's perspective, which is empathy.
I love that. So Bill Holmes has been through my leadership gap course. And so he's heard me talk a lot about this. I'm very aligned with you on this, Robin, because I think the role of the leader is the super predictable. And so we want to be a predictable leader, and we want to be an unpredictable strategist in doing that. And so what I have found is most people don't do the work to create the clarity of their vision and their values and their approach. And so one day they show up in a certain way, and the next day they show up and the same thing happens and the rules are different. And so, what is your experience in how to become that predictable person, leader, so that you can inspire trust?
You hit a few things there that I think are really critical. And that, when someone shows up unpredictably every day, there's a couple things I think cause that. One is they're dealing with stressors and factors that are impacting them, which makes them self-centered. They're also probably not having a lot of clarity. And you put this out, in one of our pre-clips. They're not understanding really their purpose and their role of what they're doing, because when you're acting inconsistently, it means that you're not really understanding what it is you're trying to achieve, the goal you're moving towards. Because if you actually came in with a clarity of thought every day of what your why is, of the whole destination that we're walking towards, you're going to be very predictable, because every action, word, and deed you're taking during the course of the day should be moving in that direction. Now, those innovators that are going to kind of go left, right on all these different ways, that's fantastic, because they know the point they're walking towards. Same thing with a leader. If the leader knows the point they're walking towards, yes, you can take this side detour over here, but it's all going to that one destination. If the leader doesn't know where they're going to, and they're just reacting to stressors around them and pain points without an understanding about the focus, then it's mayhem.
I think you're so right. I always come back to like the 4 C's of what we need in relationships, and particularly ones when you're leading people. And so the first one is clarity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so just give me the rules of the game and let me perform at a high level. And I think we do a really poor job as leaders of creating that clarity of what are the rules of the game and how do I win, right? And so I call it the 4 C's. Clarity is the first one. Challenge, or people should feel challenged. The third one is cared about. People should feel cared about as a person in your care, and comfortable that they have the tools, time, and training to be successful. And so I just look at those pieces and how they interplay with one another. And you're right. If you don't do the work to create the why and the purpose and the path and articulate it, then you're lost. You're like a leaf blowing in the wind, for sure.
Yeah, by doing all those 4 C's, you're creating the psychological comfort that human beings are seeking and craving, so they feel safe. And as Simon Sinek says, and start with why, and that is you create that golden circle of trust, so that when people feel safe, they're free to innovate. And if they know what they're innovating and solving problems towards, that's when you have massive moves and jumps forward. And it doesn't, and the other thing you have alluding to too, is it doesn't happen in a world of abundance. Generally, it happens in a world where we're struggling to overcome challenges, struggling to deal with pain points. Companies, organizations, and even nation states that are doing in a time of deprivation, if there's a feeling of safety and trust, they're going to innovate and make massive leaps forward because of those things.
I love it. When I was getting prepped for the show, I was listening to a couple of your previous interviews. And one approach that we share is that you give trust freely. Yep. And I think there's 2 approaches to trust. Either trust is earned and gained over time, or you give trust freely and every once in a while you get burned along the way. In your experience, what is the right way or what is the right approach to trust?
I'm going to answer this like I've answered a few questions with when someone asks me, is like, hey, so when do you stop being walked on like a carpet? Or at what point is being too friendly and too genuine too much? I'm going to answer this one the same way I answer that question. And that is, if it's causing resentment, stop. And everyone's resentment dial is different. I start with trust, because I don't gain resentment by giving you trust. If I get burned, well, then I own that action. It's like, all right, it's my fault I got burned because I didn't see a pain point. I didn't see a sign. I didn't see a sign of discomfort from that person, because very, very rarely in life are people out to get you. They're insecure. They're dealing with their own challenges, own problems. You did something to cause that Eye of Elrond, from the Lord of the Rings, to come focus on you. So I'm always taking accountability for the actions that I did to cause that negative emotion, that negative action to come at me from that other person. Now, granted, it doesn't mean that I'm excusing inappropriate behavior or bad behavior, but I own what I did to cause that focus to come towards me. And I just don't do resentment. And if I start doing a behavior, if I give you trust and I get burned, I own it. And I'll keep giving that trust unless it's causing resentment. If it's causing an unhealthy relationship, then I back off. Now, if I lost trust with you, you always have a chance to get it back. But I need to see repeated patterns of behavior, because I'm always assessing patterns of behavior. Because again, the definition of crazy is to do the same thing numerous times, expect a different result. I'm the same way with people in trust. If you blew trust, the likelihood of you doing it again is pretty high. So I'm always and trust to me is also in lanes. Just because I can't trust you to fly a plane because you don't have a pilot's license doesn't mean I'm not going to trust you to drive me in your car, because you actually are a decent driver. So there's lanes. And so just because you're unwilling to have a healthy relationship in this lane doesn't mean you might not be one over here or over here. Just because someone doesn't necessarily like someone's politics or viewpoints on a certain issue doesn't mean that they're not a great human being over in this lane or over in this lane. So I'm always very careful and particular about the lane in which I'm engaging someone. If it's going to have a negative connotation, I'll just take note of it and I'll make sure I kind of sidestep it or make a different choice. But it's always conscious choice. And I'm always erring on the side of let's have a healthy relationship.
I think it's great. One of the things that I talk about with our leaders is if your thoughts, your feelings, or your actions aren't serving you, then change it.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
Same thing with trust. If someone has or has done something that creates some resentment for you, then you change it. You take ownership of it. Right. We take that Buzz Lightyear approach. How do I, take ownership of everything in my life and go make the impact that I'm designed to go make? But I do think, at least for me, I made a conscious decision about trust, that I was not going to live in fear and wait for people to build trust to do enough things over time. I was more comfortable just unconditionally giving trust and then being in a place where, every once in a while I was going to get burned, and I was okay with having that risk because it far outweighed for me the daily grind of who can I trust, who can I trust, who can I trust, who can I trust. I just assume the positive and we go from there. I think that's super fun. So
there is, and I'm sorry, I was just going to, and then there are things I am looking for, not consciously, but intuitively, but this is actually things I'm looking for in that first interaction to see if I'm going to give it willingly and quickly. I'm looking for great language to make it about me. I'm looking for congruency of their verbal and nonverbal behavior. I'm looking for a positive outlook and not a victimization outlook. So I'm looking for positive signs of a healthy, stable emotional well-being is what I'm basically, because happy people generally don't look to betray you. It's the easiest way to look at it. So I'm looking for good psychological health in another human being.
I think that's great. Great piece. So Jarvis asked a question. And so Jarvis's background, since I know Jarvis, is an ex-offender and has come out of prison and made a massive difference through his own ministry, has started a farm. And one of the things that he's always looking about is, how do people re-enter society? And so his question is, how can ex-offenders build trust with employers when they have a background that immediately turns people off?
Jarvis, good for you for one thing. And it's an interesting, but actually a really simple question for me, because when I read this and, Jerry was reading it too, I said to myself, so what? And so what I mean by that, Jarvis, is so what is work with someone that just doesn't care about a past title and position or baggage. They care about and they see who you are today. Because if someone is too focused on that and they're not seeing who you are today, then they're starting out in an unhealthy relationship. They're giving themselves a predisposition to watch and find you doing something wrong, which you're going to find because you're not perfect. No one's perfect. But if they have a negative framework by which you're already starting because they're looking for you to do something wrong, that's not a place you want to be. I would go to a place and organizations and individuals that say, all right, so what? Jarvis, what are you doing for me today? I mean, seriously, I can only relate it to my own podcast. I have people from all kinds of backgrounds, gender, orientation, ethnicity, age. And you know what? I have no clue. I have no clue about anyone because it comes down to what skills you bring into the show. What amazing insights do you have? And most importantly, what did you learn? What do you think about Malcolm X's baggage, background, political leanings or not? I have read so many books about him and his life in prison, about how he really dove into study and reflection that changed who he was from before he went into prison. I think he was in eight or 9 years to the time he came out. And I have never even read anything on Malcolm X. This is like sidestepping, stuff I've read from other books, but just that mindset of here's someone that actually dove in and then learned a lot and then was transparent with what they learned. Because number one thing I have found with human beings to forge trust, it's really, really simple. Transparency, vulnerability, and humility. When you can demonstrate those three things, and then when you combine it with competence in that what you're doing, the skill set you're bringing forward, why wouldn't you trust this person? Because they're willing to share all the things that are in their lives. They're willing to share the things they've learned, and they're sharing with you the process they put in place to overcome those challenges. I'll hire that guy, left day or woman, any day of the week, because I'll trust them. Because if they're willing to share with me all the things that went sideways in your life, you're going to share everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. I can trust that because that's now empowering me with choice about how to move forward, because I know exactly where you stand. And I now know exactly what your skill set is. And so I would say focus on the people that see you that way and see the world that way. Hopefully that
I think
answers
it's
it.
important. I think that's a great answer. I was watching Pablo's show maybe a couple of weeks ago, and someone was concerned about the feedback she was getting from the community. And my feedback to her, well, that's not your community. Like, go find the people who identify with you and they're part of your tribe. And so there's lots of employers out there. And Jarvis, you're an incredible human being, and the work that you are doing is inspiring. And so find the people who say, "Hey, okay, right? I get it. If we all get judged on our the worst day or the worst decision we made, none of us stand up to that. And so we're all going to have moments where we've broken trust or made poor decisions. And so,
And Jarvis, just as I mean, I got goosebumps thinking about it. Just from your one question and that one, you haven't even spoken. I'm just reading it right here. I'm going to remember you a very, very long time. Matter of fact, I have a garden going in my backyard. The first thing that popped in my mind when Jerry read it and said your background is, I want your advice on my garden. Because you know why I'm going to trust it, because I know that you've probably dove deep on it, because you become extremely focused on what you're good at in life and what you're working on, as well as the fact that you're transparent. I mean, literally, just think about that. And anyone listening to the show now, you all are going to remember Jarvis most likely more than anything else from this conversation because of that. Because again, transparency, openness, honesty, vulnerability. Bang.
I love it. Jarvis, great question. I knew you were going to come up with a good one. I knew it.
That was easy.
Glad you're here. So walk me through, Robin. I mean, you wrote a book, The Code of Trust. It was based around, I think you call yourself the recovering narcissist. Do I have that one right?
Yeah, recovering inspired recruiter, narcissist, self-centered moron. Yeah, I have lots of good terminology. Self-centered type A, power broker.
I love it.
Is the easier one, I think, that people can identify with. Yes, I was about power, not realizing that power was not leadership.
That's right. Walk me through the best kind of power you can have.
I don't think there's any. It's about so. As we've been talking a lot, I'm a vast reader as well, and one of my favorite authors, unlikely favorite author actually, because I figured if I was in the military, he's in the military, what could I gain from it? But Jocko Willink and Leif Babin wrote two masterpieces on one aspect that they're really good at. Is one is owning it, and that's extreme ownership, and the other one is the dichotomy of leadership, and that it opened my mind up into that things aren't necessarily on a graduated scale from good to worse. They're actually, most things are a dichotomy and balance. And what I mean by that is, before, when I discovered that, wow, I suck at as a leader when I was younger, because when I was here, I go to the Naval Academy and I was a popular guy in high school, extrovert, as you can't tell, I'm an extroverted guy. And so I was popular. That kind of behavior gets rewarded with, you're made the captain of the football team, you get the president of the school student body, the clubs and all that, which is a popularity contest. And people will tell you at a younger age that, hey, you must be a natural born leader. No, I was natural born self-centered narcissist, because all that is doing is saying, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me, which is about self. Self is about power. Leadership is about others. And so taking the last couple of years, when I read The Dichotomy of Leadership and seeing that things in life are actually a balance and not necessarily a graduated scale, it became a balance between one thing and another. And then at the same time, I read Robert Greene's book, The 48 Laws of Power, which he articulated these 48 laws of how to be a self-centered narcissist, which I immediately recognized as some organizations I've worked with in the past, all the executives. I was like, wow, now I understand why they're doing that. Now I understand why I was infuriated that I didn't feel like I was being led. I was being executed on. I was being told what to do because they were executing power. And so that's when I discovered, wow, it's this dichotomy between power, which is self, and leadership, which is about service to others. Now to your question, Jerry, when's it appropriate, not appropriate? Yes, there are moments that you actually do have to exercise power, which is about self, to get in a position of leadership. so you can actually make a change, so you can make the world a better place, so you can do the righteous things that it is you want to do. Because in all honesty, to be completely selfless all the time, the likelihood of you making as big of impact as you could make is lower. I'm not saying it's in, I mean, there's Mother Teresa's out there. There's a Dalai Lama, and we were talking about that beforehand. I have the Tao Te Ching behind me. I mean, there's people that do it without it. But in reality of the corporate world and C-suite executives and things, there's going to be times when you're going to exercise power, which is about self, to get yourself noticed. So you can get in a position of leadership. But now here's the greatest challenge that most of us face as leaders is, when do you turn the power off and turn the leadership on? Because once you get that position of that title and position, which no one cares about, by the way, you have to make it about others if you're going to change, if you're going to innovate and solve problems, because that's what leaders do. They solve problems by being a resource for people. They accomplish mission goals and priorities, and they create a safe place in which to do it. Long answer. I apologize, but I have lots of thoughts on.
No, you're 100% right. And I think people who haven't done the deep reflection of becoming that predictable leader and the impact that they're going to make and how they're going to serve their people, they have to lean on their positional authority. So they do lean on their title, and it is the weakest type of authority that you can possibly have. I mean, you should be leaning into, your personal authority. People are gravitating to you because of your character and your skills and your care that you have for them. Can you break down, because I really look at the framework that you have for the code of trust, and I couldn't help but to think this is really the basis for servant leadership. And so can you give everyone a breakdown of the code of trust and the framework that you've built in building trust?
Yeah. And it's actually going to be slightly different than what you're going to see in the book, but this is my 5 steps to forging trust, which great leaders do. First, an overarching thing you need to be able to do as a leader, and that is to demonstrate that you value other people and that you want to affiliate with other people. In other words, build a tribe, because that creates psychological comfort and safety, because human beings are exceptionally predictable. We're all seeking to be psychologically comfortable in everything that we do. And if the leader that produces that psychological comfort is who they're going to follow. And we do that by using our language. Language is the first thing. It's shifting that focus from ourselves to others. And so these are the 4 pillars of great language to make sure that the other person is valued, feels affiliated, and it gets their brain rewarding them for engaging with you. And that is, number 1, seek their thoughts and opinions instead of sharing yours. 2, talk in terms of their priorities, challenges, and pain points instead of yours, because who cares about yours? 3, validate them non-judgmentally. Seek to understand them and have curiosity about them and their point of view from their optic, their perspective. That is empathy. And finally, 3, empower people with choices, because we don't give people choice unless we value them and we want to affiliate with them. And so when you build one of those 4 things, and don't have to have all 4, at least one element into everything you say, written, spoken, body language, you name it, the entire shift goes from you to them. So that's an overarching thing to make sure every time you're communicating, you're utilizing one of those 4 things. In other words, if you're trying to give someone your point of view and, hey, here's what you really need to do is this, instead of framing it like that, instead of stating it like that, ask them, hey, what do you think about doing it this way? Because now you're seeking a thought and opinion. It's that slight little shift of language makes all the difference in the world, because that's saying, hey, you have an opinion that I value, instead of saying, hey, my opinion matters more than yours. So that's the overarching. Now, the second thing is, let's execute the 5 steps of the code of trust. First one is identifying your why, and then your what and your how. The why is that ends goal, that end state you're trying to achieve. For me in the FBI, was protect national security, United States and our NATO allies. That is the overarching why. The what and the how are, I need to recruit human sources. I need to recruit spies. I need to conduct interviews for a company and a business. It's, I gave it because we had to run up before this, Jerry. I'll use this. SpaceX. We'll use SpaceX. Put Elon Musk, whatever you think about him aside, good positive note. SpaceX, that's an organization. They exist. Their big why. It's not to go to the moon. It's not to create Dragon capsules. It's not to make the Falcon Heavy rocket. It is to colonize the solar system to save the human race. That is the why. What and how? Well, we need to make rockets. We need to make capsules. We need to hire engineers. That's the what and how. So first step of any leader is to understand the destination, and then the micro, how we get there. The second step is, part of that first is what relationships do we need to have to make that happen? Because now we understand that we can't do this alone. It takes a team, it takes a tribe. We have to understand the people in our lives we need to have to make that happen. Now, the second step in the code of trust, out of all those individuals that you've now identified that are tied to the what and the how and the why, what are their priorities, challenges, and pain points? Because remember, if you're not going to communicate in terms of those priorities, challenges, and pain points, you're wasting your breath. No one is really paying attention to things you're saying. So you need to understand those priorities, challenges, and pain points, those individuals that are tied to the what and the how and the why. That's step 2. Step 3, what is their context of the world? How do they see life through their optic, their generation, their ethnicity, their gender, their orientation, where they grew up, the demographic, the social status, economic status? All of these things play into how they see the optic, because if you're not communicating using language that they can affiliate with, that they understand, again, you're wasting your breath. And then 4, going to use really effective, strong language. And that's where we're going to incorporate those 4 pillars of effective communication, seeking their thoughts and opinions, talking in terms of their priorities, validation, and power with choices. And finally, step 5, putting it all together and crafting a beautiful, sincere, organic, because it's all about them, dialogue and interaction to make it about them. That's it. Those are the 5 steps. Oh, overarching all that, suspend your ego and vanity. You are not doing this for them, because you must honor the 3 pillars of leadership, which is number 1, leaders accomplish goals, missions, and priorities in terms of the why. 2, they create a safe environment, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, and physically for the people that are working with them, because without that feeling of safety, no one's going to innovate and solve problems. And 3, you are a resource for the success and prosperity of others without expectation of reciprocity. You give willingly in abundance, because that is what the other person needs, wants, and deserves from you. There you go. That's the whole system right there.
I think you can just drop the mic and call it a day.
Thank you. I'm done.
Holy smokes. I mean, that was an incredible breakdown of exactly how you do this. And I think it always comes back to, for me, so, I always try and think about my own experiences. I ran a construction company that went from 7 million to 13 million, 28 million to 30 million. And every day I woke up and I thought to myself, how do I make Rachel happy, who's my wife? And how do I serve my people better? And I think when you have that mentality of, we rehabbed 18,000 homes in the state of Florida. I didn't pick up a single hammer, nor would anyone want me to pick up a single hammer. I'm useless when it comes to construction. But at the end of the day, making sure that my people had the tools, time, and training to be really, really successful, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
When do people get it wrong, Robin? I mean, is it literally just the inverse of people make it about them? How do you make actually, let me leave it there. When do people get this wrong?
People will get it wrong by mistake, because no one, I think, wakes up in the morning and says, today I'm just going to be a fool. I'm going to be a self-centered narcissist. But what happens is one, they haven't had the humbling moment with reflection in their life that says, hey, I need some more tools. The second thing that happens is a stress moment happens, a pain point happens during the course of the day. And when challenges happen, a lot of times people that are unaware rely on themselves to solve the problem, which exasperates a problem. And so that's the first steps that someone's getting it wrong. The hands down, the best thing that each of us needs to make sure that we don't get it wrong in any aspect in life. I've been asked, about this detection, deception, fraud detection, all these different things in life, insider threats. And if there was a golden answer for that one, there would be no insider threat. There'd be no espionage. But there is one fail safe that will always serve you well. And that is a loving critic. That is where people fail, is when they are too insecure to share with someone in their circle that is emotionally vested in your success, but not tied to your outcome that you're choosing. In other words, we're tied to the outcomes that we're choosing. So we get emotionally tunnel visioned a lot of times, and we don't see opportunities. We don't see results. We don't see other tools that we might have at our disposal to move towards the destination we're seeking. That loving critic that is on our side, our teachers, mentors, and guides that can be objective for us when we can't be it for ourselves, that's what will keep us from going astray. My wife is my copy editor. It takes every ounce of humility I have to every time I'm going to put something out, I hand it to her like this because I'm waiting for the nonverbals. Like I hand her something and I know instantly whether it's crap or not because she gives me the nonverbals of she cringes when she reads it. I go like, oh my God, here it comes. She's going to say it's horrible. But I have to do it. She makes me better because I hear inside my own head how things sound. It sounds great to me. It doesn't matter what I think. What's it sound like to someone else? What's it sound like to the person that's a consumer of what it is you're putting out? So I think we get it wrong when we're relying solely on ourselves and we think we have all the answers. I guess that's the short answer to a long answer I gave.
I think it's a great one. And I think you're right. It's one of the reasons why, before the show every week, I do office hours, and it's for senior leaders to come on and to say, hey, here's what's going on inside my business. And you have any number of people that show up and they're able to say, oh, hey, Mike, here's how I tackled that problem. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? And you're exactly right. You can give people really good advice because I'm not tied to the outcome. And so it's not emotional for me. And I can look and say, here's the right approach. And I've seen this 10 different times and, different contexts, but here's the path that you need to head down.
And it's very difficult. And Jarvis, I'm going to call you out again on this one because I'm only guessing because for me, I'm curious whether you had a similar experience. I grew up in a very not wealthy family. I was the first one to even try to go to college in my family. My dad was worked in retail as a department manager at a store that went out of business. I mean, my mom, no college, nothing. I mean, literally they worked odd jobs around town to make ends meet. And so I had to become extremely self-reliant at a young age. Started working at like 7 or 8 years old, mowing lawns. I mean, I was literally a paper boy mowing lawns. I worked for cash all the time. Cash was king for me. Did everything I can to do this. So you become extremely self-reliant, but that is both good and very bad because I was so self-reliant every time a challenge faced up in my life. Like when I went to the Naval Academy, I was like, I got this because I'm self-reliant. I was told that if I just work hard, I can achieve anything. No, you can't. You can't achieve anything alone. It takes relationships and healthy, strong relationships to get you through those times when things go a little sideways. And it took me a while to understand I need a tribe. And because, I mean, I can only imagine, because I've worked with people, same thing, when we have that aha moment, when people like me have that aha moment, and maybe Jarvis, you did too, where you're like, wow, I kind of really suck at this and I overplayed my own self-importance. I need to humble up and get some better skills at saying I need help. That takes an immense amount of humility that people that are self-reliant have a hard time with.
I think anyone who's been around me any period of time, my favorite words in business, I need your help.
Yeah.
Because I believe two are better than one. And, when I look at my 9 principles of personal performance, which I think is episode 3 or episode 5 early on, principle 7 is we stand on the shoulders of giants. You have to make your relationships work. So, the whole notion of a self-made man is really the genesis of ego is the enemy. I've not done anything worthwhile in my life without other people and people who have loved me and the best. I love Ryan Holiday. I know we share a fondness for him, but I think when people start getting their own self-importance wrong, that's when trust starts to break down, because what is the ulterior motive that this person is doing, trying to influence our relationship to create the outcome that they want, not necessarily that I want. And I'm a pawn now in that. Have you ever done any research or, feedback on, people, we talk about gut feel, like, oh, I just have this gut feel, which is really this, I think, the misalignment of how someone is acting and how I feel they have a different motive. Can you give any feedback on a gut feel?
Yeah, I'll give you my interpretation of gut feeling and intuition that people have. And there are different people with different takes on this. In general, that gut feeling you have is coming from our great ability that we have as human beings to read incongruencies or congruencies in other people. And what I mean by that is so the easiest thing to do is take, for example, you go to buy a used car. And I'm not picking on used car salesmen because there's some fantastic ones out there, but I use the used car salesman analogy. And that is, or any salesman, you just, because you're thinking, I got these mad skills. I'm going to listen to his words because I know I'm going to trip him up on his words. But all of a sudden the words are wow, these words are really great. They're really poetic. But man, this guy just really makes me feel creepy. That's because you got an incongruency happening. The nonverbals are no longer congruent with the words, and we pick up on these things because he's saying it's all about me, but his verbals are saying there's intensity, there's a tempo change, there's a directiveness coming at it, there's a non-flexibility. There's, when I'm asking a question, it's being redirected, it's not being transparent, it's not being open, it's not being a vulnerability. In other words, there's incongruencies between the verbals they're giving off and the non-verbals. And so that's where that gut feeling, we say, oh, I have these great spider senses. Okay, if that's what you want to call them. What I'm calling it is you are a great observer of human behavior, and you've actually had been in a place in your life at some point where you actually had to vastly pay attention to the behaviors of those around you to interpret it accurately for your survival, psychologically or emotionally or physically. So that's why people that tend to have these great skills, a lot of times they're coming from dysfunctional families, whether there's some sort of abuse going on in the family, whether physical, drug, alcohol, because they were so on eggshells all the time, they became heightened to other people's verbal behavior or nonverbal behavior. They have a really good, what they think is intuition. You okay? But it's because you're picking up on incongruencies. You actually are very attuned to people's behavior. Matter of fact, the book I'm finishing up right now, Robert Greene's book, The Laws of Human Behavior, he talks about this. Matter of fact, I just got off a show talking about this. Like, God, I wish I could remember the psychologist. But anyway, this gentleman back in I think it's late 1800s, he had suffered from polio and became paralyzed, and he went into a coma at a young age. And so, but he could still hear and see the world around him. He became so focused on what his sisters and mom and his family was doing every time they entered the room for like months and months and months. He eventually retrained his brain to reactivate the muscles and he got all his functions back again and became a psychiatrist and a psychologist. But the amazing thing was, because all he could do was take in their verbals and nonverbals, and that was it, and not interact. He knew when everyone was having a good day or a bad day. In other words, as a counselor, he would have people walk into his office and before they even start, he'd say, how long you've been cross-dressing? How long you've been cheating on your spouse? I mean, all because he was watching, because became so attuned to what they were saying non-verbally, because he had lost all those senses. So intuition, it's not some superpower that is, from beyond the grave or anything. It might be, but from my observation, my experience, because people are highly attuned and they observe without judging the world around it.
It's amazing.
Once long answer again. Boy, I got to stop doing that. I'm sorry.
Robin, you're crushing it. You're dropping gold. If anyone has any questions, you can put them right into the chat. I have a couple more that I want to pick Robin's brain about, but if there is anything in the frameworks that you are interested in learning a little bit more about, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything. I'm transparent.
let us know. That's right. So one of the things that I think is interesting is, you spoke a little bit about this, being in the Marines and being judged 14th out of your
14.
Class of 14, and realizing, this whole I'm a born leader, that's not exactly what it's all about. And so, I think about founders and CEOs who start this journey of impact. And, when you start out and it's just you, and it's, you talk to yourself every day and you drink your own Kool-Aid and you think it all makes sense, it is all about you to start with. But how do you stop making it about you? Any tips in how you made that transition from being the hard charger who you thought power and leadership was about you and making the impact that you wanted to make, and transforming that into service of your people and the community and the people that you get to serve?
Again, lots of different answers in there. The overarching one is just asking yourself and reflecting. Again, reflection is a big part of this entire process. And that is, am I being effective? Is what I'm doing effective? So as an entrepreneur, is what is the service I'm providing? Are people wanting it? Bob Berg's book, The Go-Giver, is a great example of, are you bringing immense value to someone else? Are you being of service to someone else? And I even asked him on my show, I said, Bob, I said, so at what point does giving so much, when you get your return? He goes, well, the return will come when you bring immense value to others. And I go, yeah, but what if you keep bringing value to others and there's no return? He goes, well, then you're not giving them what they need. I was like, well, that's a really good point. So, it's a combination where you're bringing that immense value, but that value has to serve a priority, challenge, and pain point to someone else. And then realizing that, am I forging the relationships I need? Because the second part of it is bringing that value and bringing that service. But the other thing is, you're not going to get the most important thing in the world as a business leader, as a leader, anything without brand, personal as well as professional, as well as company. If a lot of people are selling the same widget, the only thing that's going to place your widget above anyone else's is your personal brand. And that personal brand comes from what kind of relationships can you forge? How well do you make it about the other person? What's the service you're offering? What relationships are you forging? Do you remember someone's name for the rest of your life after you meet them, Jarvis? Which I will remember forever. So that's that point, is what I'm doing being effective? So when I was ranked last at 14 out of 14 second lieutenants, and I had this image of myself, I was a natural born leader. I'm great at this. I'm a popular guy. Everyone else loves me. And you get that slap in your face and you're like, no, you kind of suck. And I asked that question. I said, well, what am I doing wrong? And he says, well, you just need to be a better leader. Again, that blew my mind because I was like, I thought I was. And I go, well, how? And he goes, well, you just need to make it about everyone else but yourself. I had no idea what the hell this guy was talking about. What do you mean make it about everyone else but myself? I thought that's what I was doing. I said, how do you do that? And he goes, well, just figure it out. Welcome to life's challenge. But that's what I'm sharing now, is how to make it about everyone else but yourself. So ask yourself, as that leader, in anything you're doing, whether it's in your family or in your neighbors or in your business, are you seeking the thoughts and opinions of others instead of sharing your own? Are you talking in terms of their priorities, challenges, and pain points instead of sharing what you think they are? Are you validating them non-judgmentally by being curious about them without judging them? And are you giving them choice about how to move forward? That's what leaders do. That's how they communicate. I wasn't doing that. I was telling you exactly what I thought about you. I was talking in terms of what I thought was a pain point. I was guessing at it. I was not curious about you whatsoever, because I figure if you're not like me, you must be wrong. And giving you choices, what are you nuts? The choice I give you, you're going to make a mistake. That's what bad leaders do. They're not doing those four things.
That's amazing.
I see you reflecting. Yes. Know someone like that?
I always just come back to, and I mean, that was so good and so articulate of just, first of all, I mean, no one shows up at any point in time and says, you know what, I really want to suck today.
Right.
And yet, as leaders, we create environments that don't allow people to flourish. And, you just broke down so articulately why that breaks down, because you forget that we don't do life alone. We all stand on the shoulders of giants. We have to make our relationships work, and you have to solve problems that people care about. And it's not always just your own. And so, I think about yours. Right. And part of me was thinking, Robin, the second half of my career, I've been super lucky. I've run 5 different businesses, 5 different industries, B2B, B2C. I've been in places where you clip out in the newspaper and send it to your mom. Super lucky to be in the right place at the right time. But I want to positively impact 5 million people over the next 5 years through better business.
Yep.
And how do I serve people to do that? Because I don't want anyone to go home, and I want Summerlin go home and have someone ask, well, how was your day today? She goes, I don't know. I don't know if it was a good day. I don't know if it was a bad day. And just that whole notion of, how do we make sure that people go home every day feeling good about the work that they're doing and the people that they're doing it with?
And it's a great question, but I think it's easy. Well, it's easy to say, harder to do. And that is, they have to understand their impact on how they are serving the greater why. The one, that they know why they were brought on board to serve exactly what purpose. You had that great clip, the warm up, for this, about talking about, the mopper of the floor. If that mopper of the floor doesn't understand how them mopping that floor the best they possibly can is going to impact that bottom line in their future, then why would they even care? And if the leader doesn't know exactly what that impact is, the leader's totally failed them, because then they're just punching a clock too. And if people are just punching a clock, who the hell wants to show up for that? Okay, so you want to make money. That's fine. But again, money is empty. Again, I once again, I saw today that the happiest people in the world are making about 75,000, all with inflation right now, probably about 80,000 a year. That is psychologically stable people that are completely happy, because really all you need is food, shelter, and pretty much it. Relationships. I think about, when I was growing up, with no money, happiest days of my life. I was out working, being productive. I felt valued. I felt useful mowing those lawns. My customers loved the way I mowed lawns. I remember the one time I figured out what fertilizer was, because I figured I'm going to be cheating on this fertilizer I'm dropping on this lawn. I didn't know what a drop spreader was. And all of a sudden I was like, you know what? Screw this. It's taking too long going up and down this one lawn. So I was like, I can just do it like this. I'm squiggling all over the lawn. 2 weeks later, I go back. You should have seen that green grass and some really weird designs on the front lawn. The valuable lesson. You got to do the job right, because people will not value when you don't. So these are good lessons early in life to realize that, hey, you don't need much. You need to do something. You need to understand why you're doing it, the impact it has on others in a positive way. You talk about, making that difference, hitting 5 million people, right? My whiteboard right here. Let's change the world a podcast at a time. That is my why. I am in the second half of my life, spy recruiting, who the hell cares? I am a podcaster that is trying to take great Jedi Master skills and sharing it with the world. Because you know what? It is the most humbling thing in the world is, one, read a book that says how much I suck at everything. And then I'm going to talk to someone else. I literally just talked to a gentleman, Jim Lawler. He'll be on my show in a couple of weeks. Jim Lawler is, I call myself a master spy recruiter. I'm a Padawan learner compared to this guy. And he just gave the most amazing talk on how to forge trust and recruit spies I've ever heard in my entire life. And I felt I'm sitting here as a little kid learning from this individual, feeling like a complete fraud. That's what you do in life. You take that knowledge and you pass it along. Anyway.
And Robin, that's why we're here, because all of us are better together. And you have experiences that you're incredibly generous to share with all of us. And, I look at all of that, when you're able to put your ego aside and think about, I come back to the construction company I ran. I used to say all the time, if you start asking the question, what's good for me instead of what's good for the business, then I have failed you as your senior leader, because I have not connected you to the purpose of the mission that we are on. And that is my fault. That is not your fault. That is my fault. I need to do a better job of that. And so just keep on keeping the focus on how do we help people unlock their best and do it together. And that's, the whole purpose of your show. It's the whole purpose of my show. Let's crowdsource all the experiences that I've had to get my teeth bashed in. I don't want other people to get their teeth bashed in. It hurts. It's painful. And so I'd rather just share the lessons and allow you to crowdsource that and integrate into your own life.
And it works because, as people have listened to me before know, I call it proud parent syndrome. I am the father of a daughter who's a nurse, and she's extremely successful. My son, who's now a Marine as well. I live in Fredericksburg, Virginia, just south of Quantico, Virginia, and he's a Marine just up the road from me now. And here he is at 22 years old, and we strategize relationships all the time. And we work on getting over our ego and being of service to others, all the time. He has been the greatest student on the face of the planet because we've done it together. Because he's getting a redo on all the stuff I did wrong. Both my kids, because we do it together. This life is a team effort, and if you think you got it by yourself, okay, I'm not judging you, but I'm going to watch that path, and I'll be here for you when you want to eventually, have someone else on it, because this is not a solo sport in this world.
I love it. Before we take any questions, if people have them, Robin, where can people find out more about the work that you're doing, your books? Give it to all of us.
Sure. I have a one-stop shop. It's called peopleformula.com. All one word, peopleformula.com. I also bought the domains, so you can use robindreeke.com if you want, but peopleformula.com. On my website, I basically have 3 pillars, three vectors. One, I do have books, and I actually have a self-mastery program. So I also try to be transparent with my framing, my context. My books that I've read in the last 2 years are on there. I have them broken down in phases and stages of the things I've learned, including my 3 books are kind of at the header of each of those. My first book, this one right here, it's not all about me, 10 Techniques to Quick Rapport. It is a quick, simple read. It's an Audible now. I just put out on an Audible copy. I had a great time putting it together. And I do coaching, mentoring. My podcast is called Forged by Trust. So definitely check out my podcast. It's more of amazing guests, like not like me, but like Jerry and you all.
Just
in the
like
audience.
you, Robin. Just like you.
And also, I do have a great course coming up that I'm doing with Judy Ryan, who's a former guest of mine on the show. That we have a CEO and executive limited 12 people course coming up, kind of like a boot camp for folks in July. If you're curious about that, go to my 10 episode recap. It's the last podcast I put out this past week and see it in the show notes there. So lots of resources, basically peopleformula.com. If you need anything or want to reach out to me in any way, LinkedIn, Twitter, I'm on and I'm all.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
There you go. Thanks, Maria.
Summerlin had a question. You mentioned a few amazing books that she's read. What other books would you recommend? And I know that there are some of them are on your website, but any ones in particular?
It depends on what you're going for. I always kind of like you, Jerry. It's got to depend. So I have a couple of vectors that I read in. I do a lot of self-awareness books. I'm a big fan of Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, New Earth. The Tao Te Ching is behind me. I read an excerpt from this every day. And so I do a lot of self-awareness reading. Part of that is Ryan Holiday's books on Stoicism, which are great. It's all about problem solving and a way to engage challenges in life, which I've read all of his books, which are great. I also do a lot of historical reading because it gives me context. So probably the great book to understand the current world right now is The Splendid and the Vile. It's actually right up there. Who wrote it? Eric Larson. It's actually about Winston Churchill's family during the bombings of London during World War II. So, for all the horrendous things that are going on in Ukraine and Russia and all the civilian casualties, context and historical context are always important because 45,000 civilians died during the bombing and the blitzkrieg that the Germans did in the UK during World War II. So it gives you great context. So anyone that says the world is going to hell, we've been here before. It's going to happen again. So it gives you great historical context. So I do a lot of that. I read biographies. Hey, if you're in the news and media, I'm probably going to read about you because to give you great context, I've recently written in 2015, Elon Musk's book gives a great historical background on him and SpaceX and Tesla before it became inflammatory for people. Really good book on understanding him and the way he sees around corners. Again, great thing I liked about that one is it was a biography. So the writer was not a fan, or it was just a very objective look at him, I thought. So those are just a handful of books off the top of my head. There's lots. It depends on the area.
Summerlin, I think Robin is a mass consumer of knowledge. As Seth Godin once said, he consumes knowledge like a whale consumes plankton.
Only because I learned how much I suck at it. So yeah, it's humbling, very humbling. Oh, and anyway, the current one too, Robert Greene, the Laws of Human Nature, right there. That's my current one.
Now, Robert Greene's written some really great stuff. He was the mentor of Ryan Holiday.
Yes, he was. Well. That's why I read 48 Laws of Power, and it's interesting. The writing style is very different between Holiday and Greene, obviously. And I since our last conversation, I thought about this. Robert Greene does not have rose-colored glasses when talking about humanity or behaviors. It's actually kind of, I wouldn't say pessimistic. It's kind of, he really highlights good behaviors, but a lot of a lot of unhealthy behaviors with people, even in his laws.
Negative for sure.
Yeah, so
negative for sure.
So I always try to boost it with a good biography after that.
I love it. Fantastic stuff. I don't know if anyone has any questions. If you do, you're happy to pull yourself off mute and ask the question. I always know Bill Holmes is good for a question or two. Always has an interesting one, especially for another military guy. But if this week, Bill, you don't have a question, not a problem.
Put it out.
There he is.
All fun stuff. Well, Robin, I have thoroughly enjoyed this. I hope everyone here has enjoyed learning from Robin. I mean, the opportunity from a Naval Academy to a Marine to a spy catcher and talking about trust. I don't know that you get much better or more authentic firsthand views and knowledge to be able to do that. So I am so grateful for you and for Pablo for connecting us. And so for all of you, next week, we have Scott White, who is the Life's Too Short guy, how you can create an incredible life and opportunity by taking the right mentality to life. So that one's going to be really fun. And then the week after that, we have Megan Bowen from Demand Gen Live, and she's going to be super great. They've built a company, 125 people in 2 years, $100 million company. And so talk about a rocket ship. That'll be a fun one too. So Robin, thank you so much for coming on and inspiring us. This has been great. And all of you, hopefully we'll see you again next week.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jerry. And everyone, be safe out there.
Amen. Amen.